Hey samplers, it's Catherine Grant. I am here today to celebrate some extra bonus content because my novella, Letters to Her Love, just released today. So I wanted to share with you a little scene that I'm reading. So this clip is just the scene, there's no interview afterwards. I hope you enjoy. So this is from Letters to Her Love, which is an epistolary novella that is told through letters, journals, and other paperwork found at Northfield Hall. So we begin with a menu. July 11th, menu for luncheon, serve as a picnic at the pond. Cold steak pie, cauliflower ragout, potato croquettes, spinach and eggs, macaroni salad, berry pies. July 11th, 1819. My dearest mother, the party at Northfield Hall is well underway. Today, we toured the grounds. It is a well-planned estate with fields allotted for the various crops to keep everyone fed and clothed. The animals are well tended, as are the laborers. That said, I spotted several opportunities for efficiency. For example, any laborer who is married is eligible for a private cottage, which has resulted in a significant area of the land being allocated to private housing. If it were mine, they would all live in the lodging houses, with suites created for families as needed. Of course, I kept this to myself, but I am making notes for our new manufacturing works. Most thrilling to you, I am dining with the best of society, including the Duke and Duchess of Herefordshire and the Countess of Pemberley. There are no young ladies, aside from our hostess, unfortunately, but I was delighted to discover that Mrs. Zelio has joined us. Do you remember her from Rodelinda in '09? She is just as beautiful as before. More so, for now her figure is more womanly and her sensibilities calmer. After our tour today, we picnicked near the pond, which is what they call a charming though small lake at the confluence of a few of their fields. I sat with Mrs. Zelio, and she took great interest in my plans, for which you will recall she displayed little regard when we met her in London. I expected she would be among the flighty creatures begging to go off for a walk through the woods after the meal, but instead she remained behind with the governess so that the rest of us could explore the grounds without feeling that we had left anyone behind without a companion. While I have been hoping to make a good match with a good family, marrying a woman such as Mrs. Zelio would cause just as much of a stir in the newspapers and might end up being far less demanding to my long-term plans, not to mention the cachet I would have at the club with an opera singer as my wife instead of my mistress. What do you think? Could you welcome an opera singer as your new daughter? I remain, as always, your beloved son, Fletcher Fairhead, owner, Fairhead Glassworks. From Louisa Hoggart's journal, July 11th. 3 more pages written about Mary and Oliver. They have found their way down the mountain, but now I must determine what their just natural punishment will be. Still no letter from London. I cannot tell what Elena is about. Does she consider me a mere friend, one with whom she can share confidences but not kiss? Or does she, like me, feel some deeper current of energy flowing between us? This morning I was resolved to remember that it was the former. I did get some sleep, and it was enough to clear my mind to see that just because I want to kiss her doesn't mean she wants to kiss me back. Even if I fall desperately in love with her, I cannot expect her to return even a fraction of my feelings. I went so far as to put on father's ring so that each time I looked down at my hands, I would be reminded of his stern lecture. You must not expect love of that nature from another woman. I was glad to be wearing it when we started the tour of the grounds. Elena did no more than smile at me before lacing her arm through Lady Pemberley's. They hung in the back of the group, while the Duchess of Herefordshire drew me into conversation about how to incorporate lessons on the natural world into formal education. This is not to speak ill of the Duchess. She's a kind lady with good questions about how best to rear her 4 children, 2 from her first marriage and 2 belonging to the Duke. Under other circumstances, I'm sure I would have enjoyed the conversation, especially as it turned to discussions of the monthly salons she hosts with Lady Gresham, for women of good breeding to debate politics. As it was, I had to devote every ounce of concentration to not thinking about Elena. She wore a yellow day gown that emphasized the shine in her dark hair and the crimson of her lips. Or perhaps Or perhaps that was rouge smudged on with precise skill. Either way, she was a vision, but not a vision for me to ogle. When I did look back, for how can anyone keep from glancing at the object about which one cannot stop thinking? She turned away as soon as our eyes met. Not in an unfriendly way, but in such a way that reminded me she had not been thinking about kissing me senseless last night. Lord Preston gave the short version of the tour, which is to say we followed the main paths to see the lodging houses, the trade village, the northern fields, and the textile works. I stayed outside to avoid a headache from the noise of the clattering looms. We finished around noontime at the pond, where the footmen had set up picnic tables and the maids had carried out a cold luncheon. Again, I looked down at my ring for fortitude, and again I was glad I did. Elena elected to sit between Miss Caroline and Mr. Fairhead, a businessman who was clearly eager to make good connections. As for me, I sat with Lord Preston and Mr. and Mrs. Gilliatt. I should have enjoyed the table very much, as Mr. Gilliatt lives living as a portrait artist and had all sorts of delightful yet incisive anecdotes to share. Here is proof of how little my attention remained with the table. I cannot remember a single one of his stories now. Only a few hours later, I was still picking at my food when the others broke up into small groups. Mr. Fairhead asked Lord Preston for a tour of the lodging houses, to which Lord Preston eagerly agreed. He is clearly trying to influence Mr. Fairhead into prioritizing the laborers of his manufacturing works. Others decided to follow the path that leads into the forested western acres. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, in fact, but somehow I looked up from my macaroni salad to discover that only Elena and I remained at the picnic tables. Don't feel as if you need to remain behind on my account, I said, trying my best to sound unaffected by the fact that we were now alone. My feet are tired. Yet she rose, crossed the distance between our tables, and took the seat directly beside mine. I am happy sitting here, looking at the water. The pond does not present a particularly remarkable view. It is, in fact, a glorified draining ditch, though it is deep and wide enough for a party to swim in it on the hottest of summer days. At the moment, we were set up looking across the water to the beautiful grove of lilac trees on the southern bank and blooming hydrangeas on the east. And of course, I wasn't going to object. My daughter is at the seaside, Elena volunteered. I like to think of her walking along the water. It is good for the soul, don't you think? I agreed. We talked about her daughter more. Beatrice is almost 9, and it is clear that Elena is both extremely proud of her and extremely anxious about her future. I can't blame her, as there are few options available to the natural daughter of an earl. If Elena can find a new protector, perhaps, or even a man who would marry her, then she might hope for a decent marriage match for Beatrice. Otherwise, Beatrice will likely need to follow her mother into the opera or ballet or some other artistic trade that doesn't peer too closely at parentage. None of that was said expressly, of course. Elena told me about how talented Beatrice already is at singing, dancing, and acting. Beatrice likes to write her own plays, apparently, and perform them, even if it means she must act every part. This brings Elena great delight. Recounting one such production, her smile was so big and bright I thought it might blind me. When I asked about her education, it came out that Elena has been teaching Beatrice herself. She knows how to do basic sums, and she can read and write in English, Italian, and French, at least as much as any child can. But I'm afraid I didn't need Elena to finish that sentence to understand what she feared. An opera singer would not have much education in history, natural sciences, or mathematics. Not that the natural born daughter of an earl needs that kind of education. Yet Elena is fast approaching the limit of what she can provide Beatrice, and once it is surpassed, the girl's childhood will be defined by what she does not have instead of what she does. If we are both in London next year, I said, knowing that I shouldn't, perhaps I can find time to provide Beatrice instruction. Elena looked at me as if I had offered her £100,000. But surely you will have your own charges to look after. It seemed too much to explain my scheme to her at that moment. Who knows what the future will hold? She reached for my hand, the way she had last night, the way she had when I had ended up spilling soup all over her. Clearly, it is a mere gesture of hers. When she feels a connection with someone or wants them to feel connected to her, she creates a physical connection too. She's not flirting. She's not expressing some deep yearning the way I would be if I reached out for her hand. Still, After spending all morning trying not to take inappropriate notice of her, the touch set me on fire. I gasped out loud as her fingers, warm and soft, landed on mine. I must have jerked too, for she ran her dark eyes over my body. You have a knot in your neck? The moment she suggested it, I did feel tension in my neck. The muscles between my shoulders and my head suddenly felt unbearably tight, no doubt from trying so hard to sleep last night. I suppose I do. In a fluid movement, as graceful as a pirouette, Elena rose to stand behind me and placed her palms on my shoulders. Oh, the sensation was exquisite. To be touched by her, to be cared for by her. What hope did father's ring stand against such a gesture? So that's an excerpt from my epistolary novella, Letters to Her Love. And I hope that you go read it from wherever you read ebooks and enjoy the rest of the story.